The air in courtroom 4 crackled with a tension thicker than humidity. On one side sat my lawyer, David Chen, his face a mask of professional calm that didn't quite reach his eyes. On the other side, an empty chair. My pregnant wife, Annalise, had refused all contact for 2 months. No calls, no mediation, no legal representation. Then this morning a courier delivered a single brown paper-wrapped box to the courthouse. The tag bore my name, Liam O'Connell, and a chilling instruction in Annalise's elegant script to be opened in front of the judge. It wasn't a legal filing, it was a time bomb. And as Judge Sterling finally motioned for the bailiff to bring it forward, I felt my perfectly curated life about to be publicly detonated. Our life, to anyone looking in, was perfect. Not just good, but an aspiration. We lived in a restored Victorian home in the Oak Bay neighborhood of Victoria, British Columbia, a place where old money and new tech fortunes coexisted behind manicured hedges. I was Liam O'Connell, a senior project manager for a successful software development firm, pulling in a salary that afforded us comfort and the quiet luxuries that defined our circle. Annalise Reed. My wife of 4 years was the brilliant, beautiful heart of that life. With a master's degree in art history, she'd been a rising star at a prestigious downtown gallery before we decided together that she would step back to focus on starting our family. And now she was 7 months pregnant with our first child, a son. We'd named him Noah before he'd even made his presence known with a first kick. Our friends Mark and Jessica Riley often joked they wanted to be us when they grew up, usually over a bottle of expensive Cabernet on our back deck, the salty air of the Salish Sea drifting over us. Our weekends were a picturesque montage of farmers' markets, coastal hikes with our golden retriever Winston, and intimate dinner parties where Annalise would hold everyone captive with her passion for the arts and her effortless grace. She was the calm to my ambition, the culture to my code. Where I saw spreadsheets and deadlines, she saw beauty and narrative. She decorated our home not just with an eye for design, but with a story for every piece. The antique sideboard in the dining room was from a little shop we'd stumbled upon during our honeymoon in Quebec. The abstract painting in the living room was by a promising young artist she'd championed at her gallery. Our home wasn't just a house. It was a museum of our love story, and Annalise was its chief curator. When she told me she was pregnant, it was on a Tuesday morning. I was knotting my tie, mentally running through a critical presentation, and she just stood in the doorway of our bedroom, holding the positive test in her hand, with a smile that could have outshone the sun. In that moment, the abstract concept of future snapped into sharp, brilliant focus. It was Noah. It was this house filled with the sound of a child's laughter. It was everything I had ever worked for. I worshipped her. I truly did. I loved the way her nose crinkled when she laughed, the fierce intelligence in her eyes when she debated a topic she was passionate about, the protective way she'd already begun to rest a hand on her swelling belly. So when the first crack appeared, I dismissed it as a fissure, not a fault line. It was a Tuesday, just like the day she told me we were expecting. I came home late, the lingering stress of a project delay clinging to me like a cheap suit. The house, usually warm and filled with the scent of whatever delicious meal Annalise was preparing, was quiet and dark. I found her in the nursery, sitting in the new rocking chair we'd assembled together just last weekend. She wasn't looking at the freshly painted robin's egg blue walls or the hand-carved mobile of woodland creatures hanging over the crib. She was staring at her laptop, her face illuminated by its cold blue light. "Annalise, honey." "You okay?" I asked, loosening my tie. She didn't look up. "Did you know that the average cost of a private daycare in this city is over $2,000 a month?" I blinked, thrown by the question. "That's a lot. But we can handle it, can't we?" I said, with a confident smile moving to rub her shoulders. She flinched almost imperceptibly, and I let my hands drop. "And university," she continued, her voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth, "to guarantee Noah a good education without him taking on massive student loans. Financial advisors suggest a starting fund of at least $100,000. Factoring for inflation, of course." "Annalise, what is this about?" I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Noah's not even born yet. We have plenty of time to plan for all of that. Our finances are solid. You know that." She finally closed the laptop and looked at me. Her eyes, normally the color of warm honey, looked hard opaque. "Are they, Liam? Are they solid?" "Of course," I said a little too quickly. "My promotion came with that bonus last year, and my portfolio is performing well. We're fine, more than fine. I asked you last week if I could see the statements for the investment portfolio," she said, her voice still unnervingly calm. "The one you manage? You said you'd print them out for me." I had said that, and I had forgotten, or more accurately, I had avoided it. "Right. Sorry. It's been hell at work. This new launch has me buried. I'll get them for you this weekend. I promise." She just nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. It felt less like an agreement and more like a verdict. She stood up, her hand instinctively going to her belly, and walked out of the nursery without another word. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The smell of fresh paint suddenly seemed cloying, suffocating. I told myself it was pregnancy hormones, the nesting instinct kicking into overdrive, a sudden anxiety about the monumental life change ahead of us. It was a plausible explanation. It was a comforting explanation. And it was a lie. The lie had started small. A white lie, a lie of omission, meant to protect her. At least that's what I told myself. It began a year ago with a guaranteed investment opportunity pitched by a charismatic former colleague, Ethan. It wasn't just stocks. It was a revolutionary tech startup. A game changer. Ethan spoke of IPOs and multi-million-dollar buyouts with such unshakable confidence that it felt like a sure thing. The potential returns were staggering enough to secure not just Noah's future, but the future of our grandchildren. So I moved some money. A significant amount from the portfolio I managed for us. I didn't tell Annalise. Why worry her with the details? I'd surprise her when the investment matured, a grand gesture to show her how much I cared, how I was always planning for our security. But the startup faltered. The projected launch dates came and went. The confident updates from Ethan became more sporadic, more defensive. The money was gone. Panicked, I tried to recoup the loss. I made another investment, this one riskier. I leveraged our assets. I fell deeper into the hole, all the while maintaining the facade of our perfect, financially secure life. Every time Annalise asked about our finances, a cold knot of dread would tighten in my stomach. I'd show her the healthy statements from our main accounts, conveniently omitting the cratering losses from the separate investment account I'd set up. I was running a marathon of deceit, and I was getting tired. The week after the tense conversation in the nursery was a masterclass in avoidance. I bought her a beautiful, expensive maternity dress she'd admired, hoping the gesture would paper over the cracks. I booked a prenatal massage for her at a luxury spa. I was attentive, complimentary, and unfailingly cheerful. She accepted the gifts and the gestures with a quiet, unnerving politeness. The warmth was gone. She moved through our beautiful home like a ghost, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. The explosion happened on a Saturday. I was in my home office, frantically trying to track down Ethan, whose phone now went straight to voicemail. Annalise appeared at the door, holding a piece of mail. It was a registered letter. "This came for you," she said. "It's from a company called Viridian Holdings." My blood ran cold. Viridian Holdings was the shell corporation for the second disastrous investment. It was a final notice of default. "It's nothing," I said, snatching it from her hand. "Just junk mail." "It was registered mail, Liam. You had to sign for it." I saw the postman. Her voice was dangerously quiet. "I want to see it." "Annalise, it's business stuff. It's complicated and boring. You don't need to worry about it." "Worry me?" she said, her chin jutting out with that familiar stubbornness I once found so endearing. "Show me the letter." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's my business. Just drop it." The look on her face shifted from suspicion to a deep, profound hurt. "Your business? I thought we were a family. I thought this was our life, our future. The one I gave up my career for. The one I'm carrying our son into." The argument escalated quickly, fueled by my panic and her rising sense of betrayal. Voices were raised. The carefully constructed walls of our perfect life began to crumble. "Why won't you just be straight with me?" she cried, tears finally streaming down her face. "What are you hiding, Liam? I am protecting you," I yelled back, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I handle the finances. That's how it works. You don't need the stress of this right now." "The stress?" She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "The stress is living with a man. I suddenly feel like I don't even know. The stress is being lied to." She turned and walked out of the office. I heard her go upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing. I collapsed into my office chair, my head in my hands. The threatening letter from Viridian Holdings crumpled in my fist. I thought I'd let her cool off. I'd go up in an hour, apologize, and finally come clean. I'd explain everything, how I'd only been trying to build a better future for us, how I'd fix it. But when I went upstairs an hour later, the house was silent again. A suitcase was missing from the top of our wardrobe. Her toiletries were gone from the bathroom. Her car keys were no longer in the bowl by the door. Her car was gone. She had left. The first 48 hours were a blur of frantic calls and texts, all unanswered. I called her mother, who informed me in a voice dripping with ice that Annalise was safe but would not be speaking to me. I called Mark and Jessica, but they hadn't heard from her. Panic gave way to a simmering anger. How could she do this? She was 7 months pregnant. She was emotional. She was overreacting. I was the victim here, misunderstood and abandoned. A week later, a courier delivered an envelope to my office. Inside, there were no tearful letters, no demands for an explanation. Just cold, hard legal documents. She had filed for divorce. The petition was concise and brutal, citing irreconcilable differences. The final page was a motion to be filed with the court, requesting the immediate and exclusive use of our home. Her reasoning was stark as a pregnant woman nearing her 3rd trimester. With no independent income, she required stable housing. My anger morphed into sheer disbelief. My home. The home I paid for. This wasn't the Annalise I knew. The sensitive, art-loving woman I married had been replaced by a cold, calculating stranger. I immediately called the top-rated family law attorney in Victoria, a shark named David Chen. During our first meeting, I laid out my version of the story. A hormonal, irrational pregnant wife who had abandoned our marriage over a minor disagreement about finances. I was reasonable. I was heartbroken. I was the stable provider, and she was the emotional wreck. David, a sharp man with an impeccably tailored suit and an even sharper mind, listened patiently. Mr. O'Connell. "Liam," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "In my experience, there are three sides to every story. His side, her side, and the truth. You've given me your side. We've received nothing from hers. No lawyer has contacted us. No counter-petitions have been filed. She's gone completely silent." "So what does that mean?" I asked. "It means she's either going to come back to her senses and drop this whole thing," David said, "or she's building a case. Her silence is unusual. It could be a strategy. A strategy for what I scoffed. She has nothing. I have been a perfect husband." David just looked at me. "Let's hope the judge agrees with you. In the meantime, we fight her motion for the house, we file a counter-petition, and we try to force her into mediation. We will paint a picture of a loving, stable husband who desperately wants his wife and unborn child to come home. For the next 2 months, that's exactly what we did. We sent letters. We filed motions. We left voicemails. And from Annalise's side, there was nothing but a profound, unnerving silence. The legal process churned on in a vacuum. It felt like I was fighting a phantom. The lack of response was maddening. It made me look unreasonable, aggressive, even as my lawyer filed motion after motion that went completely unanswered. Then the court date was set to hear the preliminary motions, including the one about who got the house. And still no lawyer for Annalise was on record. She was going to represent herself. It was insane. She'd be eaten alive. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my closet, picking out a suit. I chose a conservative navy blue, a responsible husband suit. I felt a surge of confidence. The judge would see a composed, successful man and would likely order Annalise, the runaway pregnant wife, into mandatory mediation. We'd sort this out. She'd see reason. That's when the doorbell rang. It was a court courier. He handed me a small box about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in simple brown paper. My name was on the tag, and below it, the instruction that made the blood drain from my face to be opened in front of the judge. It was from her. It was the first communication I'd had from my wife in 2 months, and it wasn't a letter. It wasn't a legal document. It was a package, a mystery box, a Trojan horse delivered right to my doorstep on the morning of our reckoning. The box sat on the passenger seat of my car on the way to the courthouse, an inert, brown paper-wrapped threat. I didn't touch it. I barely looked at it. It felt radioactive, humming with a malevolent energy that filled the small space of my BMW. What was inside? What game was Annalise playing? I met David Chen on the courthouse steps, holding the box like it was a venomous snake. His usual professional composure evaporated the moment he saw it, and read the tag. "Good God," he murmured, taking it from me and testing its weight. It wasn't heavy. A few pounds at most. This is irregular. Highly irregular. What is it, David? What's her play? I demanded, my voice tight with anxiety. I don't know, he admitted. His eyes narrowed in thought as we walked through the marble-floored lobby. It's a tactic, a theatrical one. She's bypassing discovery, avoiding the normal legal channels. She wants to create a moment of high drama in the courtroom. She's counting on the element of surprise. We passed through security, the box sliding through the X-ray scanner without incident. No weapons, at least. Just something. Surprised me with what I hissed as we found a quiet corner. Our wedding album, a copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting. She has nothing on me, David. Our life was perfect. Nobody's life is perfect, Liam. David said, his tone sobering. Think. Is there anything she could have found? Any old emails, text messages you thought you deleted? Any indiscretions? He looked at me pointedly. No. Absolutely not, I said with complete honesty on that front. I had never cheated on Annalise. My betrayal was financial, not physical, and I was certain I had covered my tracks perfectly. The secret investment accounts were paperless, the emails from Ethan sent to a private address. There was no way she could have untangled that web. Okay, David said, taking a deep breath. Then we stick to the plan. We object to this exhibit. It's procedurally improper. The judge will likely agree. It won't even be opened. We portray it as a desperate, hysterical stunt by an unstable individual. We remain the calm, reasonable party here. His confidence was a temporary balm on my frayed nerves. He was the expert. He knew the rules. This was just a desperate gambit from an amateur. We entered courtroom 4. It was a modern, soulless room, with wood veneer paneling and fluorescent lighting. It felt cold, sterile. We took our place at the plaintiff's table. I scanned the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The gallery was mostly empty, save for a few law students and other lawyers waiting for their turn. And then she walked in. It was the first time I had seen her in 2 months. Pregnancy had transformed her. Her belly was prominent now, a perfect round globe she carried with a new, deliberate grace. She wore a simple, dark blue maternity dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked pale, tired, but also resolute. The soft, romantic woman I knew was gone, replaced by a soldier marching into battle. Our eyes met across the room. I tried to convey a look of pained longing, of confusion, of a husband desperate for answers. Her expression was utterly blank. It was like looking at a stranger. She didn't offer a flicker of recognition, of hurt, of anger. There was just nothing. It was the most chilling thing I had ever experienced. She took her seat at the defendant's table, alone. No lawyer, no file folders, no briefcase. Just her purse and her stoic silence. The clerk called the court to order, and Judge Elizabeth Sterling entered. She was a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for cutting through legal theatrics. I felt a surge of hope. She would not be impressed by Annalise's little stunt. We are here to hear preliminary motions in the matter of O'Connell versus O'Connell Judge Sterling, began her voice crisp. Mr. Chen, you have filed a motion to compel mediation and a counter-petition to the defendant's request for exclusive use of the marital home. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, David said, rising to his feet. My client, Mr. O'Connell, is here today, hoping for a reasonable path toward reconciliation. He is deeply concerned for the well-being of his wife and their unborn child. We believe that communication has broken down and that mediation is the most effective way to— Thank you, Mr. Chen. The judge interrupted, already, sounding impatient. She turned her gaze to the other table. Ms. Reed. You are representing yourself. Annalise stood. Her voice, when it came, was clear and steady, betraying no hint of nervousness. I am, Your Honor, and you have filed no response to Mr. Chen's motions. Do you have a position on the matter of mediation or the marital home? I do, Your Honor, Annalise said, but I believe my position is best articulated after the court is made aware of some relevant context. Judge Sterling raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose to provide this context? This was it. Annalise took a breath. Your Honor, my husband, the plaintiff, was served with a package this morning with the instruction that it be opened here in court. I believe the contents of that package will render most of today's scheduled motions moot. David shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is a complete ambush. It's a flagrant disregard for all established court procedures. We have no idea what is in that box. It could be anything. It could be inadmissible, prejudicial, or completely irrelevant. It is a desperate theatrical ploy, and we strenuously object to its introduction. Judge Sterling looked from David's indignant face to Annalise's calm one. Ms. Reed. A response to that objection. The contents are not evidence in the traditional sense. Your Honor, Annalise said carefully, they are not intended to prove a specific point of contention in the divorce filing itself. They are intended to provide the court with a foundational understanding of the circumstances that led to my departure from the marital home and my subsequent silence. It is, as you said, context. I believe it speaks directly to the questions of stability, communication, and good faith that Mr. Chen has raised. The judge leaned forward, her sharp eyes fixed on Annalise. It was clear she was intrigued. The calculated, intelligent words from the supposedly hysterical wife did not match the picture David had been painting. You are making a very unusual request, Ms. Reed. The judge said, her tone cautious. You are asking me to suspend the normal order of proceedings to indulge in a bit of courtroom theater. I am asking the court for 3 minutes of its time, Your Honor, Annalise replied. I believe it will save us many hours in the long run. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I held my breath. I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. This was my life being debated. My narrative, my carefully constructed identity as the good husband was on the line. I shot a panicked look at David, but he was staring at the judge, his jaw tight. Judge Sterling held her gaze on Annalise for a long, tense moment. Then she sighed, a flicker of something frustration in her eyes. Mr. Chen, I appreciate your objection, and you are procedurally correct, she said, her voice firm. However, family court often deals with unconventional circumstances. Given that Ms. Reed is representing herself and is in an advanced stage of pregnancy, I am willing to grant a small amount of latitude. She looked down from her bench at the box which David had placed on our table. Bailiff, please bring the package to the witness stand. My heart stopped. David's objection had been overruled. The bomb was going to be detonated. Your Honor, I must object for the record, David said, his voice strained. Your objection is noted, Mr. Chen. And overruled, the judge said, her tone final. Let's see what's in the box. The bailiff, a large, impassive man, walked over to our table, picked up the box, and placed it on the stand as if it were an ancient relic. All eyes in the courtroom were fixed on it. It looked so small, so ordinary. Yet it held the power to either vindicate me or destroy me. I looked at Annalise. Her face was still a mask of calm, but I saw her hand resting on her belly, trembling slightly. This was costing her. It was a massive gamble. As the bailiff's hand reached out to break the seal, I realized I had no earthly idea what she was capable of. I had underestimated the woman I married, and I was about to find out just how badly. The sound of the paper tearing echoed in the silent courtroom like a gunshot. My own breathing was loud in my ears, a ragged, desperate rhythm. The bailiff, with the methodical dispassion of his profession, unwrapped the brown paper and set it aside. He lifted the lid off the plain cardboard shoebox. For a moment, he just looked inside. Then, without a word, he turned the box and tipped its contents onto the smooth wood of the witness stand. It wasn't one thing. It was a small, curated collection of seemingly random objects. My mind, frantic and desperate, tried to make sense of them as they lay scattered under the harsh fluorescent lights. The first thing that caught my eye was a pacifier. A simple blue baby pacifier, still in its plastic packaging. A wave of nausea rolled over me. What was this? A symbol of the child we were supposed to raise together. A cruel reminder of what she was taking from me. Next to it lay a small leather-bound book. I recognized it instantly. It was a new moleskin notebook, identical to the ones I used for work. But this one wasn't for work. On the cover, embossed in gold foil, was a single word, Noah. It was the journal Annalise had bought me a few months ago so I could write letters to our unborn son. I had written one entry. One. About my hopes and dreams for him. The rest of the pages were blank. Then there was a stack of papers held together by a simple binder clip. From my seat I could see they were bank statements. But they weren't the doctored, edited ones I had shown Annalise. They were the real ones. The statements for the secret investment account I had opened with Viridian Holdings. I could see the massive initial transfer from our joint savings. I could see the catastrophic plunging red numbers that chronicled its demise. My blood turned to ice. How had she gotten those? They were paperless statements, sent to a secure email address only I had access to. Beside the statements was a single photograph. It was of a man smiling broadly, standing with his arm around another man in front of a sleek, modern office building with the name Innovate Dynamics on the glass doors. The man smiling was Ethan, my charismatic former colleague. The other man was not me. And finally, there was a small velvet pouch. The bailiff, at a nod from the judge, opened it and emptied its contents. Out rolled a single perfect Okoye pearl. I stared at the collection of items, my mind reeling. A pacifier, a journal, bank statements, a photograph, and a pearl. It was nonsense, a random assortment of junk. David was right. This was the act of an irrational person. I felt a surge of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy. She had nothing. This was pathetic. David leaned over to me, whispering furiously. "This is it. This is our opening. It's incoherent. She's lost her mind. Let her talk. Let her dig her own grave." Judge Sterling stared at the items on the stand for a long time, her expression unreadable. She looked less like a judge and more like an art critic examining a bizarre installation. Finally, she looked at Annalise. "Ms. Reed," she said, her voice laced with a dangerous calm. "This is your context." "It is your honor," Annalise said. She stood up, and for the first time she walked slowly towards the witness stand. Her hand resting on her belly, as if to draw strength from the life within it. She stood beside the scattered items, a curator ready to explain her exhibition. "Your Honor," she began, her voice resonating with a quiet power that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "Mr. Chen has painted a picture of me as an emotional, unstable woman who fled a loving marriage for no reason. He speaks of my husband's desire for reconciliation. These items are my response." She picked up the pacifier. "This is a pacifier for my son, Noah," she said, holding it up. "It cost $3.99 at the pharmacy. For the past 3 months, as I have been living with my mother, I have been buying things like this. Diapers, onesies, wipes, small things. Because while my husband speaks of providing for his family, he was systematically eliminating our ability to afford even the most basic necessities for our child." She then pointed to the stack of bank statements. "These are the statements from an account with Viridian Holdings, an account my husband opened, without my knowledge, using $150,000 from our joint savings money we had earmarked for this baby for our future. He told me it was in a low-risk mutual fund. As you can see from the statements, he invested it all in a single, high-risk tech venture that has gone bankrupt. The money is gone, all of it." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom's gallery. David was on his feet, but the judge silenced him with a single, sharp glare. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The courtroom walls were closing in. It was true, every word of it. But how did she know Annalise then picked up the moleskin journal? "This is the journal I gave my husband, so he could write down his thoughts for our son. He wrote one entry full of beautiful words about wanting to be a good father, a provider, a role model. He wrote that entry on a Tuesday. The very next day, Wednesday, according to the bank records, he made a second transfer of $50,000 to another shell corporation chasing his losses. He was writing promises to our son with one hand while gambling away his future with the other." Her voice trembled for the first time, thick with a pain that was raw and real. She placed the journal down gently, as if it were a fragile, sacred object. Then her composure returned colder and sharper than before. She pointed to the photograph of Ethan. "This man is Ethan Cowell. He is the man my husband told me was his former colleague who pitched him the can't-miss investment. I did some research. Ethan Cowell has never worked at my husband's firm. In fact, he has a documented history of failed ventures and 2 fraud investigations against him in Alberta. That information is publicly available had my husband bothered to look. But that's not the most interesting part." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "The other man in the picture," she said, her voice dropping, "is named Stephen O'Connell. He is my husband's half-brother, a half-brother I never knew existed. The tech startup Innovate Dynamics wasn't Ethan's company. It was Stephen's. My husband didn't invest with a colleague. He gave our life savings to a secret brother he has been supporting for years, funding a fantasy while lying to me about it every single day." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I stared at the picture at the smiling face of my half-brother, a man I hadn't seen in years, but had been sending money to out of a misguided sense of familial guilt. A man Annalise wasn't supposed to know existed. My carefully constructed world wasn't just cracking. It was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece in front of a judge and jury of strangers. Finally, Annalise looked at the single shimmering pearl lying on the wood. Her face softened, and for a fleeting second I saw the woman I had married. "And this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the pearl." The pearl seemed to absorb all the light in the room, a tiny sphere of luminescence against the dark wood of the stand. It looked out of place amongst the harsh evidence of financial ruin and familial deceit. It was an object of beauty in a landscape of ugliness. Judge Sterling leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Ms. Reed." She prompted, her voice softer now, stripped of its earlier impatience. "What about the pearl?" Annalise didn't pick it up. She just looked at it, and when she spoke, she was no longer addressing just the judge, but everyone. It felt like she was finally addressing me. "For my 30th birthday, 2 years ago, Liam gave me a beautiful string of Akoya pearls," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "He told me they were a family heirloom, passed down from his grandmother. He told me his grandfather had given them to her on their wedding day, and that his own father had given them to his mother. He said the O'Connell tradition was to give these pearls to the woman you intended to spend your life with. It was the most romantic story I had ever heard." She paused, taking a shaky breath. I remembered that day perfectly. The look of pure joy on her face as I fastened the cool, heavy strand around her neck. The story had been a lie, of course. I'd bought the necklace from a high-end jeweler downtown. But it was a beautiful lie, a harmless one meant to create a sense of history and permanence for us, for our new family. I cherished that necklace, Annalise continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I wore it for every important occasion. It represented our history, our future. It connected me to a family legacy I was so proud to be a part of. When I found out I was pregnant with Noah, I would hold the pearls and imagine one day telling him the story of passing them on to his wife. She finally met my gaze across the courtroom. The blank mask was gone, replaced by a look of such profound and searing disappointment that it felt like a physical blow. "Last month, after the fight in your office, Liam, after you yelled at me for asking to see a single piece of paper about our finances, I started to feel like I was standing on a floor that was giving way. Nothing felt real. That night I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs and I needed to touch something solid, something true. I took out the pearl necklace." She gestured towards the stand. "I've always been detail-oriented. It's the art historian in me. I noticed the small things. The clasp on the necklace had always been a little loose. I decided to look at it more closely to see if it needed repair. On the back of the clasp, there was a tiny, almost invisible inscription, an engraver's mark. I'd never noticed it before. My heart hammered in my chest. I had no memory of an engraver's mark. "Out of curiosity, I looked it up," Annalise said. "It wasn't an old heritage jeweler. It was the mark of Davigny and Sons, a well-known luxury jewelry store right here in Victoria. The next day I took the necklace to their store. I told them I had inherited it and was interested in its provenance. The manager was very helpful. He looked up the sales record." She paused, her gaze locking onto mine. "This was the kill shot. He confirmed the necklace was purchased 2 years ago by my husband. It wasn't a family heirloom passed down through generations of O'Connells. It was bought and paid for with a credit card. The beautiful story, the tradition, the connection to his family that he had sold me. It was all a fabrication, a lie designed to make me feel cherished, while the truth was that my husband was a man who would lie about anything big or small to create the perfect picture that he wanted. The courtroom was utterly still. The financial ruin was one thing. That was about money. But this was about our story, our love. She had taken the very foundation of our relationship and exposed it as a fraud. That night, Annalise's voice dropped to a near whisper. I realized that if the pearls were a lie, everything could be a lie. If the story of our past was a fabrication, what did that say about the future he was promising me, promising our son? So I started digging. The final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying clarity. It started with the computer in his home office. He always used the same password for everything. Our anniversary. Ironic, isn't it? A bitter smile touched her lips. It took me less than an hour to find the private email account, to find the emails from Ethan Cowell and the ones from his brother Stephen, to find the links to the e-statements from Viridian Holdings. It was all there. A whole secret life, a whole secret family, a whole secret financial catastrophe. She looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, that is my context. That is why I left the marital home. I didn't flee because of a hormonal whim. I fled because I discovered I was married to a stranger, a man who built our entire life on a foundation of lies, and that is why I remained silent. She continued, her voice ringing with conviction. I knew if I confronted him, he would lie more. He would charm and manipulate and gaslight me just as he had for years. He would hire an expensive lawyer like Mr. Chen to paint me as crazy and irrational. So I did the only thing I could think of. I left, and I gathered the truth. Not allegations, not accusations. The simple, physical, undeniable truth. She gestured to the items on the stand. The pacifier, the journal, the statements, the photo, the pearl. This box is not a legal filing, Your Honor. It's a story. The story of a good husband. The pacifier he couldn't afford. The journal of promises he couldn't keep. The savings he gambled away. The secret family he funded with our money, and the beautiful lie he told me to win my heart. She finally turned and looked squarely at me. All pretense gone, her face a mask of cold, righteous fury. I sent no lawyer because the truth doesn't need a lawyer. I sent no statement because the evidence speaks for itself. I asked for this to be opened in front of you, Judge, because I wanted you to see the man I was married to, not the fiction he and his lawyer were prepared to sell you. She rested her case. She had said her piece. She walked back to her table, sat down, and placed a protective hand over her son. Her work was done. I looked at David. His face was pale. His professional mask shattered. He was staring at the witness stand, at the 5 simple items that had just dismantled his entire case and my entire life. He opened his mouth to speak, to object, to say something, but no words came out. What could he say? What defense is there against the truth? Judge Sterling slowly surveyed the scene. Her eyes moved from the items on the stand to Annalise's resolute face, and finally to me. Her expression was one of utter contempt. Mr. O'Connell, she said, her voice like chipping ice. Do you have anything you'd like to say? The entire courtroom turned to look at me. I was no longer Liam O'Connell, successful project manager, loving husband. I was a fraud, a liar, a gambler who had been caught. The navy blue suit felt like a costume. My throat was dry. I opened my mouth, but like David, I had nothing. No words, no defense. No lies left to tell. The silence was my confession. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Every tick of the clock on the wall felt like a hammer blow against the anvil of my public humiliation. Judge Sterling's question hung in the air, not as an invitation, but as a final damning indictment. Do you have anything you'd like to say? I looked at David Chen, my high-priced shark, for some kind of lifeline. He just gave a minuscule, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He was a lawyer, a man paid to argue and spin. But Annalise hadn't presented an argument. She had presented an autopsy. Our marriage, my credibility, my entire identity laid out and dissected on the witness stand for all to see. There was nothing left to spin. "No, Your Honor." I finally managed to croak the words, feeling like sandpaper in my throat. Judge Sterling nodded a grim final motion. "I see." She removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose, a gesture of profound weariness. When she put them back on, her eyes were like steel. Well, she began, her voice cutting through the tense quiet. "This has certainly been illuminating. In my 15 years on the bench in family court, I have seen a great deal of acrimony, sadness, and deception. But Mr. O'Connell, the sheer scale and callousness of the deceit demonstrated here today is frankly astonishing." She looked at David. "Mr. Chen, you came in here today prepared to argue that your client was a stable, loving husband, and that Ms. Reed was an emotional, irrational woman who abandoned the marriage. Is that a fair summary of your intended position?" David, to his credit, stood and faced the music. "Yes, Your Honor, based on the information provided to me by my client." The last phrase was added with a subtle but clear emphasis, a lawyer distancing himself from a toxic client. "I'm sure," the judge said dryly. "Well, the context that Ms. Reed has provided has thoroughly demolished that narrative. It is clear to this court that Miss Reed did not abandon a marriage. She escaped a sham. Her actions, her departure, her silence were not born of instability, but of a calculated and, I must say, remarkably courageous strategy to protect herself and her unborn child from further harm." She turned her attention back to me. Every word was a nail being hammered into the coffin of my old life. "You didn't just make a bad investment, Mr. O'Connell. You stole from your family. You took your wife's security money. She had a rightful claim to money she was counting on for the child you supposedly created together, and you gambled it away to fund the ventures of a secret brother you'd hidden from her. You didn't just lie by omission. You constructed an elaborate fantasy world, right down to the fraudulent history of a pearl necklace to entrap your wife in a life that was fundamentally untrue. Your motion to compel mediation," she scoffed, "denied. There is nothing to mediate here. There is no trust left to rebuild. It would be a cruel and pointless exercise to force Miss Reed into a room with a man who has so profoundly betrayed her. Your counterpetition for the use of the marital home," she shook her head in disbelief, "also denied. In fact, I am granting Ms. Reed's original motion in full. She will be granted immediate, exclusive, and undisturbed use of the marital residence at 1420 Willow Lane, effective immediately. You will vacate the premises by 5 o'clock this evening. You may be escorted by a police officer to retrieve your personal belongings, and nothing more." I flinched as if struck. My house, my home, gone in a single sentence. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice growing colder still. "Given the evidence of financial malfeasance, I am entering a temporary financial restraining order against you, Mr. O'Connell. You are hereby prohibited from selling, transferring, or borrowing against any and all remaining marital assets without express written permission from this court. I am also ordering an immediate and full forensic accounting of all your financial activities for the past 5 years, to be conducted by a court-appointed accountant, the cost of which, Mr. O'Connell, you will bear entirely." David's head dropped slightly. This was a rout, a complete and utter legal catastrophe. As for child support and alimony, Judge Sterling said, looking at Annalise with a newfound respect. We will address that at a future hearing after the forensic audit gives us a clearer picture of what, if anything, is left of the marital estate. But I assure you, Ms. Reed, this court will ensure that Mr. O'Connell meets his financial obligations to his son, even if it means garnishing his wages for the next 18 years. She gathered her papers, her judgment delivered. This court is adjourned. The sharp rap of her gavel sealed my fate. Judge Sterling stood and swept out of the room, leaving a stunned and silent courtroom in her wake. For a moment, nobody moved. The spell was broken by the sound of David Chen snapping his briefcase shut. He turned to me, his face a mixture of professional fury and personal disgust. "You have until 5 o'clock to get out of your house, Liam," he said, his voice low and venomous. "I'll have an associate meet you there with a copy of the order to ensure you don't violate it. My office will be in touch about the bill for my services today. And let me be clear, you will need to find new counsel. My firm will be filing a motion to withdraw as your representation. We do not represent clients who deliberately mislead us and make a mockery of us in open court. You have comprehensively ruined your own life. Don't expect me to stick around for the funeral." He turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving me utterly alone at the plaintiff's table. Across the room, Annalise was slowly gathering her things. She put her purse over her shoulder and stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. As she turned to leave, her path took her past my table. I don't know what I expected. A look of triumph, a final cutting remark. Instead, she just paused for a brief second. She didn't look at me. She looked at the empty space beside me where my lawyer had been. Then her eyes drifted to the witness stand, to the small pile of objects that had told her story. Her expression was not one of victory, but of profound, bone-deep sadness. It was the look of someone who had been forced to burn down her own home to save herself from the man inside. And then she was gone. I sat there in the empty courtroom for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes. The bailiff eventually came over. "Sir," he said not unkindly, "you have to leave." I stood up on unsteady legs. I walked out of the courtroom past the gallery of strangers who had just witnessed my complete immolation and into the harsh, indifferent light of the afternoon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from my boss. "Need to see you in my office. Now." The news had traveled fast. I thought about the box, the pacifier, the journal, the statements, the photo. The pearl. It wasn't just a box of things. It was a perfectly constructed narrative. Annalise, the quiet, sensitive art historian, had curated her final exhibition. And the subject had been me. It was a masterpiece of storytelling, and it had destroyed me more completely than any legal argument ever could. That day in court wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of the life I knew. The story of the box, the pregnant wife who sent no lawyer, spread like wildfire through our social and professional circles. I lost my house, my job, and the respect of everyone I knew. Annalise, on the other hand, became a quiet legend, a woman who refused to be a victim, who used her intelligence and pain to forge her own justice. She gave birth to Noah 2 months later, and through the court-ordered sale of our assets, she built a new, honest life for them both. The story serves as a chilling reminder that the truth, when packaged correctly, is the most powerful weapon of all. It doesn't need a loud voice or an expensive suit. Sometimes it just needs to be opened in front of a judge. Thank you for listening to this real-life drama. The story of Liam and Annalise is a powerful lesson in betrayal strategy and the devastating power of the hidden truth. If you were moved or shocked by this story, please hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a story that's stranger than fiction. What did you think of Annalise's tactic? Was it genius or did she go too far? Let us know in the comments below. And for more gripping stories of family drama and courtroom showdowns, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we have in store.